If you have ever believed that Bitcoin makes you invisible, this case will permanently destroy that belief. And once you see every layer of what the FBI has been building for 71 days, you will understand why a former federal prosecutor went on national television and used one single word to describe what investigators now have over the person who took Nancy Guthrie. Control. If this kind of deep forensic breakdown is what you are here for, hit that like button right now, subscribe to this channel, and share this video because what I am about to walk you through is one of the most important forensic stories in the history of American criminal investigation. Let's get into it. They thought they were untouchable. They sat somewhere in a room at a desk, maybe across a border, maybe somewhere the FBI could not easily reach, and they composed a ransom note. Carefully. Deliberately. They chose their words. They structured their demand. And then they included something inside that note that they believed was their greatest protection. Their armor. The one piece of this entire operation that would keep them hidden from every federal investigator, every forensic analyst, every law enforcement agency that was about to come looking for them. A Bitcoin wallet address. A string of letters and numbers. Pseudonymous. Decentralized. Connected to no name, no face, no identity document, no bank account that could be subpoenaed. A digital fortress they believed was sitting between them and consequences. They were wrong. Not slightly wrong. Not wrong in a way that took years to discover. Not wrong in a way that required a whistleblower or a lucky break or an informant to surface. Wrong in a way that from the very first day that wallet address appeared in that ransom note, handed federal investigators a forensic tool more powerful than any surveillance camera. More permanent than any physical evidence. More irrefutable than any eyewitness testimony in the history of criminal investigation. Wrong in a way that a former federal prosecutor, a man who has spent his entire career watching criminals try and fail to hide from the justice system, went on national television and described in one specific, precise, devastating word. Control. The Bitcoin exchange gave authorities control over Nancy Guthrie's kidnapper. Welcome to Crime View. I am going to spend the next hour with you going through every single layer of this. I am going to start at the very beginning. Not just February 1st, the night Nancy disappeared, but further back, at the foundational misunderstanding that made this entire forensic opening possible. I am going to walk you through the ransom notes, every one of them, and what each one contained and what each one revealed. I am going to explain in plain language that anyone can understand exactly how blockchain forensics works and why the tools the FBI deployed in this case are among the most powerful investigative instruments in the history of federal law enforcement. I am going to walk you through the $152 transaction, the specific event that transformed passive blockchain surveillance into active real-time prosecution building forensic control. I am going to talk about the international dimensions of this case and why the Bitcoin trail crosses every border that traditional law enforcement cannot. I am going to address the 71 days of silence and what that silence actually means. And I am going to show you piece by piece how every layer of this forensic story converges into a single inevitable conclusion. Everything in this video is fact-based. Every claim is sourced from verified public reporting, expert testimony, and confirmed law enforcement statements. I am not going to speculate. I am not going to name suspects. But I am going to show you something that will completely reframe how you understand this investigation. And once you understand it, once you see the full picture assembled the way I am going to assemble it for you today, you will understand why a former federal prosecutor looked at all the evidence in this case and said the Bitcoin trail is the best lead the FBI has. Stay with me all the way through. Not because I am asking you to. Because the full picture only makes sense when you have every single layer. Let me start with who Nancy Guthrie is. Because before we can understand why someone targeted her, before we can understand the financial calculation behind a $6 million Bitcoin ransom demand, we have to understand the person at the center of this case. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She is the mother of NBC Today co-host Savannah Guthrie, one of the most recognizable faces in American morning television. She is the mother of Annie Guthrie, who lives in Tucson with her husband Tommaso Sion. She is a grandmother. She uses a walker for mobility. She takes critical daily medication. She has a pacemaker. And she lived quietly, privately, ordinarily, in a home in the Catalina foothills neighborhood of Tucson, Arizona. Not a mansion behind a gate. Not a fortress surrounded by security. A home in a neighborhood on a street where the houses sit close enough together that a neighbor's Ring camera can capture what happens on your front porch. For most of her 84 years, Nancy Guthrie's life was entirely private. Her daughter became famous, but Nancy remained in the background. She was not a public figure. She was not on social media in any significant way. She was not the kind of person whose daily routine, home address, and personal phone number were readily accessible to strangers. She was a private citizen whose connection to a famous daughter was her only public-facing attribute. And that connection, that one thread linking a quiet 84-year-old woman in Tucson to one of the most high-profile names in American television news, is what made her a target. Whoever planned this operation knew exactly what they were doing. They knew that Savannah Guthrie's public profile translated into private wealth. They knew the Guthrie family had resources. They knew a demand for $6 million was within the realm of what this family could be expected to pay to get their mother and grandmother back alive. And they knew, or believed they knew, how to collect that money without being identified. That last belief. That is where they were catastrophically wrong. On the night of January 31st into the early morning of February 1st, 2026, Nancy Guthrie spent the evening at her daughter Annie's home for miles away. Dinner. A game. Normal family time. Tommaso Sion, Annie's husband, drove Nancy home. At 9:50 in the evening, her garage door closed. She was inside. She was alone. And between that moment and 1:47 in the morning, life was ordinary. Then at 1:47 in the morning, a masked individual appeared at Nancy's doorbell camera and disabled it. The pacemaker data that Nancy's device was continuously recording showed significant cardiac stress responses beginning in that window. Elevated heart rate. Physiological responses consistent with fear or physical exertion. And continuing for 41 minutes before the signal stopped at 2:28 in the morning. A 911 call came in reporting a woman screaming from a car window somewhere in the Catalina foothills. A Ring camera 5 miles from Nancy's home captured a man in a backpack at 1:52 in the morning. 8 minutes after the camera at her home went dark. And then silence. Until the next morning when family members could not reach Nancy and contacted law enforcement. Within days, notes began arriving at media outlets. Notes that contained details about Nancy that were not in the public domain. Non-public information. Information that only someone with real knowledge of Nancy's situation could have included. Which is why investigators took those notes seriously from the first moment they were received. And inside those notes, embedded in the demands, part of the architecture of what the senders believed was an airtight collection system, was a Bitcoin wallet address. $6 million payable in Bitcoin to a specific wallet address typed directly into the note. And the moment, not the day, not the week, the moment that wallet address was received by investigators, the FBI opened a blockchain explorer and started reading. No subpoena. No court order. No waiting period. No legal process of any kind required. Because the Bitcoin blockchain is not a private database. It is not an encrypted server. It is not a locked ledger held by a bank. The Bitcoin blockchain is publicly accessible to every human being on Earth who has an internet connection and knows the wallet address they want to search. This is something I need to explain carefully because I think most people who hear the FBI trace the Bitcoin imagine something complicated. A team of analysts with special government-only access to a secret financial database. Court orders flying back and forth. Months of legal wrangling before investigators can even look at the data. That is not what happened here. That is not how the blockchain works. Bitcoin was created in 2008 and launched in January 2009 by a pseudonymous developer known as Satoshi Nakamoto. Its foundational design principle, the principle that makes the entire system function, is that every transaction is verified by a decentralized global network of computers. Not a bank. Not a government. Not any single authority. A network. And for that network to verify transactions, every transaction must be recorded on a shared public ledger that every participant in the network can read. That ledger is the blockchain. The blockchain is not a metaphor. It is a literal, permanent, publicly accessible database of every Bitcoin transaction that has ever occurred on the network. Every single one. From the very first block mined by Satoshi Nakamoto in January 2009 to the transaction that happened 3 seconds ago. All of it time-stamped. Recorded. Preserved. Publicly readable by anyone. Forever. When you set up a Bitcoin wallet, you receive an address. A long string of letters and numbers that functions like an account number. You do not need to provide your name. You do not need to provide your address. You do not need to show identification. Your identity, as far as the Bitcoin network is concerned, is that string of characters. That is what makes Bitcoin pseudonymous. The wallet address is a pseudonym. A substitute for your real name. But here is the critical distinction that the people who took Nancy Guthrie either did not understand or dramatically underestimated. A pseudonym hides your name. It does not hide your behavior. It does not hide your transactions. It does not hide the history of every interaction that wallet address has ever had with every other wallet address on the network. All of that, every transaction in every direction at every timestamp, is recorded on the public blockchain and is readable by anyone who searches that address. When investigators entered the ransom wallet address into a blockchain explorer, they did not see a blank slate. They saw a financial biography. Every time funds had entered that wallet. Every time funds had left. Every sending address that had ever interacted with it. Every receiving address it had ever sent to. All of it permanent. All of it timestamped to the second. Going back as far as the wallet's existence. And this is before any subpoenas. Before any court orders. Before any legal process at all. Just the public blockchain. Just the freely accessible, permanently recorded history of every transaction that address had ever been part of. Now compound that with what the FBI did next. Because reading the raw blockchain data is only the first step. The second step, the step that transforms raw blockchain data into actionable investigative intelligence, is running that wallet address through specialized forensic software. Software developed by companies like Chainalysis and TRM Labs. Companies that have spent years building proprietary databases that associate wallet addresses with known criminal activity. Let me explain what these tools do. Chainalysis and TRM Labs are not search engines. They are forensic platforms built over years of active criminal investigation work in partnership with law enforcement agencies around the world. These platforms have accumulated databases of known wallet attributions. Every major cryptocurrency criminal case that these firms have been involved in has added to that database. Ransomware operators. Drug trafficking networks. Terrorist financiers. Money laundering services. Sanctioned entities. Dark web markets. Every major cryptocurrency crime for the past decade has left a wallet footprint. And these platforms have catalogued them all. When a new wallet address appears in a criminal case, like the wallet in the Nancy Guthrie ransom note, investigators run it through these platforms. And the platform does not just search the wallet against its criminal database. It runs a comprehensive network analysis. It maps every wallet that has ever transacted with the target wallet going back to the very origin of the funds. It identifies every exchange that any connected wallet has ever touched. It highlights any prior connections to known criminal wallets. It color-codes the transaction network and produces a visual map of the entire financial ecosystem surrounding that one address. All of this happens automatically. In seconds. Not days. Not weeks. Seconds. Because the blockchain data is already public. The software is simply organizing and analyzing what is already there. And here is what that analysis reveals that the wallet owner absolutely did not intend to reveal. Before the ransom note ever arrived, before the kidnapping, before the planning, before the preparation, that wallet had a history. Every wallet does. Unless it was created specifically for this crime. Funded with Bitcoin that has never touched any exchange. Using a device with no prior cryptocurrency activity. The probability of someone setting up a genuinely clean, attribution-free Bitcoin wallet for a major criminal operation in 2026 with the level of financial sophistication required to demand $6 million in cryptocurrency is extremely low. And if the wallet has any prior history, any prior transactions, any prior exchange interactions, any prior connections to wallets that have been flagged in other investigations, that history is there on the public blockchain waiting to be read. Ari Redbord knows this better than almost anyone alive. He is a former federal prosecutor who spent years building cases against the most sophisticated criminal networks in the world. He now works at TRM Labs, the leading blockchain forensics firm in the United States. And he appeared on Crime Stories with Nancy Grace specifically to discuss the Bitcoin evidence in the Nancy Guthrie case. What he said was not hedged. It was not tentative. He explained that every cryptocurrency address is a unique string of letters and numbers. He explained that what TRM Labs does is associate those strings with threat actors. Think terrorist financiers, sanctions violators, ransomware operators, criminal networks. He explained that investigators can trace how funds move over time, identifying those behind the demands. Not just the wallet in the note. Everyone in the financial network connected to it. And then came the statement that every person following this case needs to sit with. Nancy Grace asked the question that was on everyone's mind. Many people believe Bitcoin cannot be traced. And Redbord's response framed it unambiguously. The Bitcoin trail is the FBI's best lead on who took Nancy Guthrie. Not a lead. Their best lead. In a case with pacemaker data documenting 41 minutes of Nancy's ordeal, second by second. In a case with doorbell camera footage of the masked abductor. In a case with DNA evidence recovered from Nancy's front porch. In a case with a confirmed phone call placed to Nancy's device at 1:44 in the morning, 3 minutes before the camera went dark. In a case with surveillance footage of a backpack carrying individual 5 miles away 8 minutes after the abduction began. With all of that evidence, physical, digital, biological, temporal, a former federal prosecutor who now runs blockchain forensics at the top firm in the country identified the Bitcoin trail as the best lead. Take a moment with that. The DNA can be challenged by a skilled defense attorney on chain of custody grounds. The pacemaker data requires expert medical testimony about interpretation. The camera footage is partially obscured by the mask. The 911 call about the screaming woman requires a witness to testify about what they heard. Every other piece of evidence in this case involves some degree of human interpretation. Some potential avenue for defense challenge. Some margin that a skilled lawyer can exploit. The blockchain does not have margins. The blockchain recorded what it recorded. The transactions happened or they did not. The wallet sent those funds or it did not. The exchange received those funds or it did not. The account holder verified their identity or they did not. There are no margins in mathematics. And Bitcoin at its foundation is mathematics. That is why it is the best lead. Not because it is the most emotionally compelling evidence. Not because a jury will react to it the way they react to 41 minutes of pacemaker data showing an 84-year-old woman's heart in crisis. But because it is the most legally irrefutable thread connecting a named human being to the financial architecture of this crime. Now let me take you to the specific transaction. The $152. Because this is the event that most reporting has mentioned in passing but nobody has fully explained. And fully explaining it, understanding exactly what it did and exactly why it mattered, is the key to understanding what the phrase control over the kidnapper actually means in practice. Around February 11th, approximately 10 days after Nancy was taken, the same day new suspect images were being released from the doorbell camera footage, a Bitcoin transaction was made to the wallet address listed in one of the ransom notes. The amount was approximately $152. $152 in a case revolving around a $6 million demand. The question of who sent it is one that authorities have not publicly confirmed. It may have been the FBI running a forensic activation transaction. It may have been a journalist testing the wallet's functionality. It may have been a member of the public. It may have been someone connected to the case attempting to establish communication. The source has not been officially identified. But here is the thing. For our purposes, for understanding the forensic significance of what happened, the source does not matter. What matters is what happened to that wallet the moment the $152 arrived. When funds enter a Bitcoin wallet, the owner of that wallet faces a decision. Do they leave the funds in place? Do they consolidate them with other funds in the same wallet? Do they move them immediately to a second wallet? Do they route them through a mixing service, a cryptocurrency tool designed to obscure the origin and destination of funds by pooling them with other transactions? Do they send them to an exchange to begin a conversion to fiat currency? Do they ignore the incoming transaction entirely and make no response at all? Every one of those choices is a data point. Every one of those choices is recorded permanently on the public blockchain in real time. And every one of those choices reveals something about the wallet operator. Their level of sophistication. Their awareness of being watched. Their financial intentions. Their operational security practices. And their plans for the ransom funds. Think about it the way you would think about physical surveillance. Imagine you are monitoring a building that has been completely dark and silent for 10 days. You know the address. You believe you know who lives there. But there is no movement, no activity, no evidence of occupation, nothing for your surveillance to capture. And then a package is delivered to the front door. Suddenly the question is not just whether someone is there. The question is what they do next. Do they open the door and retrieve it immediately? Do they wait hours before responding? Do they have someone else pick it up? Do they never retrieve it at all? Do they move out of the building in the hours after it arrives? Every response or non-response tells you something. Every behavioral pattern is information. The $152 transaction was the package on the doorstep. A deliberate or incidental event that created movement in a previously static forensic situation. And whatever happened next in that wallet, whatever the operator chose to do or not to do, was captured by blockchain monitoring tools running in real time. A cryptocurrency specialist who was briefed on the investigative details of this case and discussed it in a public forum was specific about what that transaction did. It enabled investigators to monitor blockchain activity. It activated surveillance on a wallet that had been forensically static. It created a live evidence-gathering event in a previously passive observation situation. And from that activation event forward, every movement in that wallet, in real time, anywhere in the world, on any device, registers immediately in the forensic monitoring systems the FBI had running on this case. This is what control means. Not custody. Not arrest. Not physical proximity to the suspect. Control means the FBI has the ability to monitor this person's financial behavior in real time, continuously, without the subject knowing the extent of that surveillance, and to use every movement they make as additional evidence in a prosecution file that grows more complete every single day. If the kidnapper tries to move the ransom funds, any amount, in any direction, the FBI sees it the moment it happens. If they try to route it through a Bitcoin mixing service to obscure the trail, TRM Labs tools flag that routing pattern and continue tracing beyond the mix. If they attempt to cash out through an exchange, domestic or international, that exchange receives a federal subpoena before the transaction can clear. If they do absolutely nothing, if they leave the funds untouched indefinitely, that behavioral freeze is itself significant. It suggests awareness, caution, fear. And a subject who is afraid to touch their criminal proceeds is a subject who knows they are being watched. Every option leads to the same place. More evidence. More data. More threads tightening around the people responsible. And now I need to walk you through the exchange vulnerability. Because this is the piece that most people do not fully understand when they think about how Bitcoin gets traced from a pseudonymous wallet to a real person with a real name and a real government identification. Bitcoin wallets, as I explained, are pseudonymous. You can create one without providing any identifying information. But Bitcoin only has value if you can eventually use it for something in the real world. And in the real world that means converting it to fiat currency. Dollars, pesos, euros, whatever currency the holder needs. And the overwhelming majority of the time, that conversion happens through a regulated cryptocurrency exchange. Exchanges like Coinbase, Binance, Kraken, Gemini, and dozens of others are financial institutions. Not just in common parlance. Legally, they are classified and regulated as money service businesses or financial institutions under United States law. And as financial institutions, they are required to comply with Know Your Customer and anti-money laundering regulations. These are not voluntary compliance frameworks. They are federal legal requirements. Know Your Customer means what it says. In order to create an account on a regulated cryptocurrency exchange and convert Bitcoin to dollars, you have to prove who you are. Name, physical address, date of birth, government-issued photo identification. In many cases, biometric facial recognition matching. A live selfie compared against your identification photo. The exchange must verify your identity before you can make any significant transaction. What this means for the investigation is straightforward and devastating for the kidnappers. Even if they created the ransom wallet with perfect anonymity on a clean device using no personally identifying information with no prior transaction history, the moment they need to turn that Bitcoin into spendable currency, they have to interact with a regulated exchange. And the exchange has their identity on file. Verified. Required by law. The FBI can subpoena that exchange. A domestic exchange that receives a federal grand jury subpoena is legally required to hand over every piece of identity information associated with every account connected to the wallet transactions in question. Not optionally. Not after negotiation. Required by law. With criminal penalties for non-compliance. And here is the blockchain forensics piece that makes the exchange subpoena so powerful. Even if the kidnappers tried to distance the ransom wallet from an exchange by routing funds through multiple intermediate wallets first, even if they attempted to create a chain of transactions designed to obscure the direct path from ransom wallet to exchange, TRM Labs tools trace through that chain. Every hop. Every intermediate wallet. Every routing attempt. The software was built specifically to follow cryptocurrency through exactly these kinds of obfuscation attempts. The chain may be long. It may involve many wallets. It may cross through multiple jurisdictions. But it always terminates somewhere. And somewhere is a human being with a verified identity on an exchange's Know Your Customer records, waiting at the end of the blockchain trail for the FBI subpoena to arrive. Multiple independent experts who examined this case from a blockchain forensics perspective all reached the same conclusion through the same analysis. Bizal Ethan Raviv, the founder and chief executive officer of Lionsgate Network, a blockchain forensics firm, was explicit. Bitcoin transfers are not entirely anonymous. And the ransom demand as structured provided investigators with a forensic entry point that a cash demand or even a wire transfer demand would never have provided. Cash leaves no digital record. A wire transfer can be routed through jurisdictions that resist United States subpoenas. But Bitcoin is permanently recorded on a public ledger that the FBI does not need a subpoena to read. They just need the address. Ravi Sarathai at Northeastern University analyzed the case specifically and noted the fundamental contradiction built into using Bitcoin for this crime. The same global network, the same permanence, the same decentralization that makes Bitcoin feel untouchable to someone planning a crime also makes every transaction on that network permanently auditable. There is no such thing as a deleted Bitcoin transaction. There is no such thing as an unrecorded Bitcoin transaction. The blockchain remembers everything. Always. The Conversation, an academic analysis platform, published a comprehensive breakdown of how the Bitcoin demand in the Nancy Guthrie case could be used to track down the criminals. Their analysis identified the exchange interaction as the critical point of vulnerability. The moment where pseudonymous cryptocurrency must connect to real-world financial infrastructure. And in doing so must reveal a real-world identity. That moment may not happen immediately. But in a $6 million transaction, it will happen. Because $6 million in Bitcoin sitting in a wallet forever is not what kidnappers want. They want the money. And getting the money means going through an exchange. And going through an exchange means giving the FBI a name. The legal analysis firm Dynamis published a specific breakdown of the Guthrie ransom wallet. Their conclusion was layered and precise. Layer 1. The blockchain itself is publicly readable. Anyone anywhere can search the wallet address and see its complete transaction history. Layer 2. Blockchain forensics tools run automatic network analysis, connecting the wallet to every related wallet and exchange interaction in its history. Layer 3. Federal subpoena authority compels domestic exchanges to produce identity records for any account associated with the wallet. Layer 4. Those identity records connect the pseudonymous address to a named human being with a government-verified identity. Layer 1 requires no legal process at all. Layers 2 through 4 are the tools and legal mechanisms that connect public blockchain data to a prosecutable individual. All 4 layers were activated in the Nancy Guthrie investigation from the day the first note arrived. Now let me take you to something that most coverage of this case has treated as 3 separate stories, but which is actually one continuous forensic narrative. The 3 ransom notes. The 3 Bitcoin addresses. 3 separate moments at which the people responsible for Nancy Guthrie's abduction voluntarily expanded the blockchain footprint that the FBI was mapping. The first note arrived in early February, approximately 3 days after Nancy disappeared. The primary $6 million demand. Bitcoin wallet address included. Sent to media outlets including KGUN9 in Tucson and TMZ. The Guthrie family, Savannah, Annie, Cameron, appeared in a public video saying they would pay. And the FBI, from the moment that note was received, had the first wallet under forensic analysis. The second note arrived approximately a week later, also at TMZ. Different structure. Different demand. Not a ransom note from the kidnapper seeking payment for Nancy's safe return. An informant note from someone claiming to have inside knowledge of who the kidnapper was, offering to reveal that name in exchange for payment. The amount. 1 Bitcoin. Approximately $66,000 at the time. Payable to a specific Bitcoin wallet address that TMZ's Harvey Levin confirmed was a working, functional, ready-to-receive address. Not a vague cryptocurrency demand. A specific wallet set up in advance. Ready for incoming funds the moment the note was sent. Think about what that means. The writer of the second note prepared a Bitcoin wallet before sending the note. They were not improvising. They were not sending a vague demand hoping to work out the payment method later. They set up the wallet, obtained the address, and included it in the note. That preparation, that premeditation, is itself forensically significant. Because a pre-prepared wallet has a creation event on the blockchain. It has a funding history. And TRM Labs can trace all of it. Now the FBI has 2 wallets. Wallet 1, the primary ransom wallet from the first note. Wallet 2, the informant payment wallet from the second note. And the forensic question that blockchain analysis immediately answers. Are these 2 wallets related? Do they share any upstream funding source? Has any Bitcoin ever moved between them, even indirectly through intermediate wallets? Did the same exchange account fund both of them? If the answer is yes, if there is a blockchain connection between those 2 wallets, that connection is evidence of a relationship between the 2 parties. Evidence that the person claiming to be an innocent witness with inside information may actually be far more connected to the crime than they are presenting. Evidence of coordination. Evidence of conspiracy. And if the answer is no, if the 2 wallets are completely unrelated on the blockchain, that too is information. It supports the theory that the second note author is a genuinely separate individual with insider access to the operation. Someone who knows who did it. Someone whose identity and connection to the crime is itself a thread the FBI can follow. Either way, the second wallet expanded the forensic network. And then in April, more than 2 months after Nancy was taken, when the investigation had been publicly ongoing for over 60 days, 2 more notes arrived at TMZ from the same unknown author who sent the second note. And these notes are among the strangest documents in this entire case. The same author. 2 separate communications. The first claiming Nancy Guthrie is dead. The second, sent separately but clearly from the same person, claiming the writer had personally seen Nancy alive in the state of Sonora, Mexico. 2 contradictory statements from one author about the same person on approximately the same day. Now think carefully about what this contradiction tells us. An author who claims Nancy is dead and simultaneously claims to have seen her alive is either confused, lying, trying to create chaos, or holding 2 pieces of partial information that they cannot reconcile. Someone who genuinely witnessed Nancy's situation at a specific moment in Sonora, Mexico, and someone who received separate conflicting information about her status from another source. Someone caught between what they witnessed and what they were told. Or, and this is the darker interpretation, someone who is actively trying to manipulate the investigation. Sending contradictory information to muddy the evidentiary waters. Create confusion about whether Nancy is alive or dead. Make it harder for investigators to commit resources to a specific theory. Whatever the truth, the third and fourth notes from this author also came with a Bitcoin demand. Half a Bitcoin upfront, approximately $33,000 at current values. Half a Bitcoin payable when a public arrest was made in the case. That payment structure is extraordinary. Half on delivery of information. Half on arrest. This is not how kidnappers structure ransom demands. This is how informants structure payment for testimony. This person is not presenting themselves as the individual who can return Nancy. They are presenting themselves as a witness. An insider. Someone who can name the person responsible. And they want to be paid for that information in cryptocurrency. A third Bitcoin wallet address. Included in the note. Specific. Functional. Prepared in advance. And immediately added to the FBI's forensic surveillance network. 3 wallets. 3 nodes. 3 separate threads in a blockchain network that TRM Labs tools are mapping simultaneously in real time. Looking for the connections, direct or indirect, that tie them together and tie them to a real-world identity. And here is where the international dimension of this case transforms the Bitcoin evidence from important to indispensable. Because multiple threads of this investigation point toward the Mexican state of Sonora as a significant geographic element. The third note author specifically mentioned seeing Nancy alive in Sonora. FBI operations were reported near the Arizona-Mexico border in the weeks following the abduction. The geographic reality of Tucson, 60 miles north of the Arizona-Sonora border, means that in the early morning hours of February 1st, a vehicle could travel from the Catalina foothills to Mexican territory in approximately 1 hour. If Nancy is being held in Mexico, if the people responsible are operating from Mexican territory, if the command structure behind this kidnapping is based across the border, then every traditional investigative avenue becomes more complicated. Jurisdictional limitations restrict what United States law enforcement can do in foreign territory. International treaty requirements slow coordination. The involvement of foreign law enforcement entities introduces variables of reliability and information security that federal investigators have to manage carefully. Physical evidence stops at a border. Witness testimony requires the cooperation of foreign courts. DNA samples from a location in Mexico require diplomatic coordination to obtain. Surveillance of a subject in Sonora requires either Mexican law enforcement participation or legal authorities that the United States government must negotiate and obtain. All of this takes time. All of this involves diplomatic complexity. All of this creates potential points of failure. The blockchain does not care about any of this. A Bitcoin transaction made from a wallet in Sonora, Mexico is recorded on the same global blockchain as a transaction made from a wallet in Tucson, Arizona. The tools that trace it, TRM Labs, Chainalysis, operate globally. They do not require permission from Mexican authorities to read the Mexican blockchain transactions of a wallet they are monitoring. Because the blockchain is not in Mexico. It is not in the United States. It is not in any single jurisdiction. It is everywhere and nowhere. A distributed global ledger that no single government controls and that every government can read. When those three wallets move, when any transaction occurs in any of them from any location in the world, that movement is on the public blockchain within seconds. Visible to FBI analysts monitoring those addresses in real time. Regardless of where the person making the transaction is physically sitting. The border is not a barrier for blockchain evidence. The blockchain is the one thread of evidence in this entire case that crosses every geographical and jurisdictional boundary freely, silently, and permanently. And that is the operational significance that no amount of traditional investigative work can replicate. Let me now take you through the timeline of this blockchain investigation. Because when you see it assembled as a continuous sequence of events rather than isolated news stories, the depth and duration of what the FBI has been building becomes clear. And the 71 days of public silence starts to make sense. Not as stagnation, but as the deliberate, methodical construction of an airtight prosecution. February 1, 2026. Nancy Guthrie is abducted from her home in Tucson, Arizona. Her pacemaker documents 41 minutes of cardiac crisis. The signal stops at 2:28 in the morning. Her phone is left behind on the counter inside the locked house. February 4. Ransom notes begin arriving at media outlets. $6 million Bitcoin demand. Specific wallet address included. The FBI receives the note and within hours, not days, hours, blockchain forensic analysis of the wallet begins. No legal process required. The blockchain is public. February 5 and 6. The FBI publicly confirms it is investigating the cryptocurrency address in the ransom letter. This confirmation is notable. It is the FBI acknowledging publicly that the wallet is under investigation. It is also, whether intentionally or not, a message to the person who controls that wallet. Your address is known. We are watching. February 8 and 9. Fortune confirms the $6 million Bitcoin demand. The Guthrie family issues their public response saying they will pay. Legal analysis firm Dynamis publishes their breakdown of the wallet's traceability. Multiple independent cryptocurrency forensics experts begin commenting publicly on the case. The exchange vulnerability, the know your customer requirement that destroys Bitcoin anonymity the moment funds touch a regulated platform, begins receiving public attention. February 10th, 11th, 12th. This is the dense period of Bitcoin-related developments. The second note arrives at TMZ with a 1 Bitcoin informant payment demand and a second wallet address. Harvey Levin confirms the wallet is functional and specific. The FBI releases its physical suspect description. Male. 5 feet 9 to 5 feet 10. Carrying an Ozark Trail hiker backpack. Seen on Ring camera footage 5 miles from Nancy's home at 1:52 in the morning. And on one of these days, the $152 transaction arrives in the original ransom wallet. Blockchain activity monitoring activates. The wallet is no longer a static surveillance target. It is a live, active, real-time evidence event. March 14th. A cryptocurrency specialist who had been briefed on investigative developments discusses in a public forum how a Bitcoin exchange gave investigators what they specifically described as control over the kidnapper. This is the first public acknowledgement that something specific beyond passive blockchain reading occurred with the forensic investigation. That a discrete event involving an exchange produced a discrete investigative outcome. Late March, early April. Ari Redboard of TRM Labs goes on crime stories with Nancy Grace. In a nationally televised interview, a former federal prosecutor with active blockchain forensics expertise identifies the Bitcoin trail as the FBI's best lead. Not a lead. The best lead. This statement does not happen casually. Former federal prosecutors with active roles at leading forensics firms do not go on national television and make definitive assessments about active federal investigations without purpose. This is a signal to the investigation community, to the public, and potentially deliberately, to the subject of the investigation. April 2026. Two more notes arrive at TMZ from the same author as the second note. Contradictory claims about Nancy's status. Half Bitcoin payment demand. Third wallet address. Third node in the FBI's blockchain surveillance network. The mapping expands. April 13, 2026. Day 71. No public arrest. No named suspect. No announced charges. 3 Bitcoin wallets under active forensic surveillance. A former federal prosecutor on record identifying the trail as the best lead. And an investigation that grows more complete by the day. 71 days of continuous blockchain monitoring. Every transaction. Every wallet interaction. Every exchange contact. Every routing attempt. All of it feeding into a federal prosecution file in real time. Now let me address the question that I know is sitting in your mind right now. If the FBI has control, if the blockchain is this powerful, if a former federal prosecutor has gone on national television and said this is the best lead, if all of this evidence has been accumulating for 71 days, why has no arrest been publicly announced? The answer requires understanding what federal prosecutions actually are. Because I think the public perception of how criminal justice works, shaped largely by television dramas that compress everything into 45-minute episodes, is significantly different from the reality of how federal cases are built. The FBI does not arrest when they are confident. They arrest when they are ready to guarantee a conviction that survives every appeal, every defense motion, every challenge that the most expensive and skilled defense attorneys in the country can mount. Those are profoundly different standards. And the gap between confident and guaranteed is where 71 days of methodical, silent, careful work happens. Building the blockchain prosecution requires completing the chain. Not metaphorically. Literally. Link by link. Link 1. The wallet address from the ransom note. Established. Public record confirmed. Link 2. The transaction history mapped by TRM Labs. Every connected wallet. Every exchange interaction. Every routing path forward and backward in time. This work is either complete or substantially complete. The tools work fast. Link 3. Exchange subpoenas. Which exchanges did any funds connected to this wallet touch? The FBI has subpoena authority over domestic exchanges. International exchanges require additional legal mechanisms. Mutual legal assistance treaties. Diplomatic coordination. Foreign court orders. These take time. Weeks. Sometimes months. And in a case with potential connections to Mexico, the exchange jurisdiction question becomes critically important. Link 4. Know your customer records from the exchanges. Once the subpoena is complied with, the exchange hands over the identity verification records of every account holder associated with relevant transactions. Name. Address. Government identification. The human being behind the pseudonymous wallet. Link 5. Corroborating physical evidence connecting the identified wallet holder to the crime itself. DNA that matches. Pacemaker data that aligns with their location and actions. Phone records that show the 1:44 in the morning call originated from a device associated with them. Surveillance footage consistent with their physical description. Building all 5 links airtight takes time. Particularly when sophisticated defendants may have used multiple layers of wallet obfuscation. Particularly when international jurisdictions complicate subpoena enforcement. Particularly when the FBI knows that a premature arrest, one that gives the defense team the opportunity to challenge any single link in the chain before the others are secured, risks an acquittal on the most serious charges. But here is what makes the blockchain evidence singular in this prosecution architecture. It cannot be challenged on human reliability grounds. It cannot be challenged on methodology grounds the way DNA evidence can be. It cannot be undermined by a witness who changes their story. The blockchain recorded what it recorded. The transactions happened. The connections exist. The exchange records exist. The mathematics are what they are. A defense attorney facing blockchain forensic evidence in a federal courtroom has won play. Their client did not control that wallet. Someone else set it up. Someone else made those transactions. And the Know Your Customer records from the exchange, verified government identity documents, are what closed that door. The face on the government identification matches the face of the defendant. The address on the account matches the defendant's residence. The transactions align with the timeline of the crime. Defense closed. Now layer the blockchain evidence with what exists alongside it in this case. 41 minutes of pacemaker data documenting Nancy Guthrie's physiological crisis in real time. Timestamp to the second. Placing the abduction sequence within a precise window that aligns with every other piece of evidence in the case. DNA material recovered from Nancy's front porch. The same location where the masked figure appeared at 1:47 in the morning. The same location where blood was found. The same location where the physical confrontation apparently began. A phone call at 1:44 in the morning on Nancy's device. 3 minutes before the camera went dark. From a number that leads back to someone with inside knowledge of Nancy's location and routine that night. Ring camera footage of a man with a backpack 5 miles away at 1:52 in the morning. 8 minutes after the camera was disabled. Each piece of evidence corroborates the others. The pacemaker timestamps the ordeal. The phone call documents the coordination. The DNA physically connects a person to the scene. The ring camera footage tracks movement from the scene. And the blockchain evidence connects the financial motive, the financial instrument, and the financial identity of the person who expected to profit from this crime. Together these threads form a prosecution narrative that leaves no gap. A narrative that tells a complete story from the coordination call at 1:44 in the morning to the camera disabled at 1:47 through 41 minutes of documented physiological crisis through the ransom notes and the Bitcoin demand and the $152 activation transaction and the blockchain surveillance and the exchange records. A story that begins with Nancy being home and ends with a person whose wallet address is permanently etched into the public blockchain. And here is something I want to say clearly. The 71-day silence is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of patience. Federal kidnapping investigations that involve complex financial instruments, potential international dimensions, and multiple co-conspirators are not resolved in days or weeks. They are resolved when every link in the chain is secured. When the prosecution file is complete. When the FBI is not just confident but certain that the case they bring will result in a conviction that no appeals court will overturn. Sheriff Chris Nano said publicly in March that he believes investigators know the motive. He said the crime was targeted. He warned that the suspect could strike again. Not language you use about an unknown threat. Language you use about someone specific you are watching. Investigators know who they are watching. The blockchain tells them every financial move that person makes. The phone records tell them every communication that person made on the night of the crime. The DNA will place that person physically at the scene. The silence is the sound of a prosecution being built. Carefully. Methodically. Airtightly. Because when this case goes to trial, and it will go to trial, the conviction has to be the kind that holds forever. Before I bring this to a close, let me say something about what this case represents beyond Nancy Guthrie specifically. Because this case, with the public statements from Ari Redbord, with the national television coverage of blockchain forensics, with the explicit identification of Bitcoin as the best lead, is already becoming a landmark moment in the history of cryptocurrency and criminal justice. For years there has been a persistent belief in certain criminal communities that Bitcoin represents a safe payment method for illegal transactions. That the pseudonymous nature of wallet addresses provides sufficient cover to demand and receive criminal proceeds without being identified. That belief, that persistent, dangerous, wrong belief, is being dismantled publicly and dramatically in the Nancy Guthrie case. Ari Redbord going on national television to explain with the precision and authority of someone who has spent their career building federal prosecutions that every cryptocurrency address can be associated with a threat actor. That the tools exist to trace funds through any number of obfuscation layers to a verified human identity. That the Bitcoin trail in this case is the FBI's best lead. This is a public education moment disguised as a true crime story. It is a message to every person who has ever looked at a Bitcoin wallet address and thought, this is my invisibility cloak. This is the wall between me and consequences. This is the tool that makes me untouchable. The message is the wall is glass. The blockchain recorded everything. TRM Labs has been reading it since day one. And the transaction you made, the one you thought was untraceable, is sitting in a federal prosecutor's presentation to a grand jury right now. The people who took Nancy Guthrie made a catastrophic miscalculation. Not about the ransom amount. Not about the family's ability to pay. Not about the physical execution of the abduction. They made their catastrophic miscalculation in the one decision they believed was their greatest protection. They chose Bitcoin. They published the wallet address. They gave the FBI a window into their financial activity that no cash-based kidnapper in the history of criminal investigation has ever been forced to provide voluntarily. And from that window, through the blockchain forensics, through the $152 activation transaction, through the exchange records, through the real-time surveillance of every movement in 3 wallets, the FBI has been building a prosecution that when it is ready will not fail. 1 wallet address in a ransom note. 3 notes total. 3 wallets. $152. 71 days of blockchain surveillance. 1 former federal prosecutor on national television saying one word. Control. That is where this investigation stands today. And every day that passes without an arrest is not a day of failure. It is a day of construction. A day of another link secured. Another exchange record received. Another blockchain transaction mapped. Another piece of the chain locked into place. When the arrest comes, when it is announced, trace it backward. Follow every thread from that announcement back through time. And one of those threads will lead here. To a wallet address. To a public blockchain. To a $152 transaction that activated real-time forensic monitoring. To the moment a former federal prosecutor said the Bitcoin trail is the best lead. To the Bitcoin transaction that accidentally exposed Nancy Guthrie's kidnapper. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She has a pacemaker. She uses a walker. She needs daily medication. Every single day that passes is a day without that medication. Every day is a day her daughters, Savannah, Annie, and Cameron, wait without knowing. Every day matters. Please make the call. Subscribe to Crime View if you have not already. Turn on notifications. We are staying on this case until Nancy comes home. Our full breakdown of the 1:44 in the morning phone call and what it tells us about coordination and inside knowledge is linked right above this. Watch it next. The 2 videos together give you the most complete forensic picture of what happened on the night of February 1st and what investigators have been building in the 71 days since.